Okay, so today we're starting solving quadratic equations. So this is solving quadratics day 1. Our goal for today is I can solve a quadratic equation in vertex form. So this chapter for quadratics only works in vertex form. Next chapter, which is 7b, we'll solve quadratics in other forms. So only vertex form for this one. So when you hear me saying like, first I'm going to do this, it's getting you ready for next chapter too. Okay. So first off, we have to make sure we know how to simplify radicals, okay? So when we're giving our answers, we're not going to give them in decimal form. You're not going to punch these in your calculator and see what they're equivalent to as a decimal. We're going to write them in simplest radical form. This is very important for equivalency because let's say you're taking the SAT and you go to solve something, you're not going to see root 50 there. Especially on a no calculator part, it'll be in simplest radical form, so you have to know what it's equivalent to, okay? So here is how you simplify a radical. So first off, you have to know your perfect squares. So let's start with 1 squared. 1 squared is 1, but I skip it and never write it down because 1 goes into every number. Let's go to next. 2 squared is 4, so you're going to write down your perfect squares. 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, 5 squared is 25, 6 squared, 36, 7 squared is 49, 8 squared is 64, 9 squared is 81, 10 squared is 100, 11 squared is 121, 12 squared is 144, 13 squared is 169, 14 squared is usually when I'm in class, people stop and I hear pause because they're like, oh, I don't know that one. It's these two numbers are switched. So it's 196. It's just a way of remembering it. And then finally, 15 squared is 225. Now, when I say finally, that's all that I have students write down because I personally don't give you anything bigger than that. Okay, so first off, I asked myself, do I know the square root of 50? Is it in this list? Because I know the square roots of all these numbers, okay? And the answer is no. So what I have to do is I have to simplify it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look to see where 50 would fall, okay? 50 would fall right here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to test all of these numbers going to the left, and I want to find the biggest one that goes into 50. And when I say goes into, that means that that number times another whole number has to be equal to 50. So does 49 go into 50? No, because 49 times what is 50? It's 1 point something, right? So we want a whole number. So 49 does not go in there. And I always say evenly, but I mean to get a whole number answer. So 49 does not. Does 36 go into 50? 36 times what equals 50? Nope. Does 25 go into 50? Yes. Now, if you didn't know if 36 goes into 50, you could always do 50 divided by 36 and see if you get a nice answer, meaning a whole number answer. If you do, then it goes in there. Okay, so let me get rid of everything I just wrote down here and all my circles. So 25 goes into 50, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this into 2 radicals. This first radical is always going to be from that list. So 25 goes in there, and how many times does 25 go into 50? Twice. So now you're going to simplify this. The one that's highlighted, the first one you're always going to be able to simplify. The square root of 25 is 5, and then times root 2. And you don't have to put the times. You can just write 5 root 2. Okay? If you put root 50 in your calculator and you put 5 root 2 in your calculator, you'll see that they give you the same decimal answer. They're equivalent. All right, let's try 108. I'm going to switch colors here so I don't have to erase all the green the whole time. Okay. 108 is not in this list. 108, however, would fall here. So now I'm going to start checking numbers once again in this direction. Does 100 go into 108? No. Does 81 go into 108? No. 64? No. 49? No. 36? Yes. So once again, I'm going to break this into 2 radicals. We said that, let me highlight it here actually. 36 goes in there. So 36 is going to go right here, and it's root 36 is going to go right here. 36 goes in there 3 times. So now I see the square root of 36 is 6, and then root 3. Okay. All right, next one is the square root of 80. So first thing I'm going to do is say, do I know the square root of 80? Is it a perfect square? No, it's not. 80 would fall right here. Does 64 go into 80? No. Does 49? No. Does 36? No. Does 25? No. Now, people get ahead of me and they'll be like, 4 does, 4 does. Remember, I want the biggest perfect square that goes into it. So you don't want to jump all the way to the end, because if something bigger than 4 goes into it, that's what you're choosing. So I was left off at 16. Does 16 go into 80? The answer is yes. 16 does go into 80. So once again, I'm going to break this into 2 radicals. 16 goes here. And don't forget to make your radicals, because people forget them all the time. 16 goes into 85 times. So now I know the square root of 16 is 4. So this is 4 root 5. All right, next one is 26, square root of 26. So 26 is not a perfect square. It'd fall right here. So does 25 go into 26? No. Does 16 go into 26? No. Does 9 go into 26? No. Does 4 go into 26? No. So no perfect square goes in there. That means root 26 is not simplifiable. It's just root 26. There's no way to simplify it even more. It's similar to me saying simplify 6 over 8, and you're like 3/4. And I'm like, correct. And then I'm like, all right, simplify 2/3. You can't. That's as far as it goes, right? All right, and the last one is root 20. Okay, so I'm going to do root 20, radical, radical. Biggest perfect square that goes into 20. So 20 would fall right here. 16 doesn't go in there, 9 doesn't go in there, 4 does. So I'm going to put the 4 right here. How many times does 4 go into 20? 5 times. The square root of 4 is 2 root 5. Okay? We need to know how to do this to make sure our answers are in simplest radical form. If you look past to what we're doing, it says give the exact answer. This means in simplest radical form. So we want our answers in simplest radical form, so that's why I taught you how to do that first. Okay, so next it says here, the graph for y equals x squared minus 4 is shown. Use algebra to solve each equation and then check the solution using the graph. Okay, so we're going to use algebra to solve this equation. So if you notice, this equation just has an x squared. This equation just has an x squared. This equation just has an x squared. Okay? It doesn't have an x squared and an x. So if it doesn't have an x squared and an x, we're going to solve by square rooting. That's how we solve these. So in order to solve by square rooting, we have to isolate the x squared. So I need to get x squared by itself. So I'm going to add 4 to both sides. I have 4 equals x squared. And now I'm going to square root to solve, okay? So before I square it to solve, I want you to think about this. This is saying I'm thinking of a number, and I square it, and I get 4. What number am I thinking of? Now, people will always say you're thinking of 2. And I'll say, meh, that's a possible answer, but I wasn't thinking of 2. What other number times itself gives me 2? Or sorry, gives me 4. Negative 2 times negative 2 does. So not only does positive 2 works, but negative 2 works. So what you have to remember to do is that when you square root to solve, so when you're square rooting an equation, like I put that pink square root in there, I have to remember to account for the positive and the negative answer. So that's why I get positive and negative 2. All right, let's go on to this next one here. Oh, and it says verify your answer. So let's look right here. It's saying this is the equation x squared. Where is it equal to 0? So where is it equal to 0? Here and here at positive and negative 2. That is correct. All right, let's try this next one here. I'm going to switch colors so that I can use it in the graph also. So I need to isolate x squared. I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So I have 0 equals x squared. And now I'm going to square root to solve. So square root, don't forget when you square root to solve, you have to account for the positive and negative answer. So I have x equals, and I'm not going to write plus or minus 0, right? Because the square root of 0 is 0, but 0 is not positive and it's not negative. So I have x equals 0. I only have one solution there. So let's look. When y is negative 4, what is x? When y is negative 4, what is x? It's 0. All right, last one here. I need to isolate x squared. I'm going to add 4 to both sides. I have 9 equals x squared. And now I'm going to get x by itself by square rooting. I must square it to solve by doing plus or minus. So I have x equals plus or minus, and then the square root of 9 is 3. So I have positive and negative 3. So this is saying when y is negative 5, or sorry, when y is 5, what is x? So let's look to see when y is 5. Y is 5 right here, right? So if you look to see what x is, it is, this is negative 3, and this right here is positive 3. So that's right. Okay, so it says, so far we have solved linear equations which include constant terms, numbers, and terms with the variable raised to the first power. So for example, we would solve like 2x plus 1 equals 5. This is x to the first power. We will now learn how to solve quadratic equations which include terms where the variable is raised to the second power. So this will be x squared. A quadratic equation can have an x squared and an x, but in this chapter we're just going to work with ones that only contain an x squared. So next chapter it'll have an x squared and an x. So it says, suppose we want to solve the equation x squared equals 36. Let's first verbalize what the equation is asking us to find. It is asking us which number when multiplied by itself equals 36. So remember, that's 6 and negative 6. So you can write it like this. You can write it as 2 separate answers. 6 is an answer and negative 6 is an answer. Or you can write it as plus or minus 6, right? Positive 6 and negative 6 are both answers, okay? So either one of these is correct, either this or this. All right, so let's just do a bunch of examples together here. It says solve each equation for x, give the exact answer in simplest radical form, and also we're going to round our answers to the nearest hundredth if necessary. So if we get a radical answer like 2 root 5, we're also going to put it in our calculator and write it as a decimal. If you get an answer like x equals 5, you don't have to put it in your calculator, it's 5. Okay, so here's our first one. We have x squared minus 11 equals 38. So first off, what I want you to notice is that there's just an x squared right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to get x squared by itself. Okay? In order to get x squared by itself, we are going to add 11 to both sides. So now we have x squared is equal to 49. So now I still have to get x by itself because x is not by itself. So I ask myself, how do I get rid of this square right here? To get rid of a square, we square root. So I'm going to square root this side, and don't forget whenever I square root an equation, I have to account for the positive and negative solution. So I have x equals positive or negative, and now I have to do the square root of 49. Okay, the square root of 49 is 7. So notice I'm not saying the square root of 49 is plus or minus 7. The square root of 49 is 7, but we have to account for the positive and negative answers. That's why it's plus or minus 7. Okay, moving on to the next problem. Notice that there's just an x squared right here, so I have to get x squared by itself. How do I get x squared by itself? Well, in order to get x squared by itself, I have to subtract 2 from both sides. So I'm going to start by subtracting 2 from both sides. So now I have 12 equals x squared. Okay. So now I want to get x by itself. So I have to get rid of that square. So to get rid of that square, I'm going to square root. Positive and negative answer I have to account for. Positive and negative. I have x equals. And then now I have plus or minus. And I say, okay, wait a minute. I need to know the square root of, hold on, let me move this down, of 12. And I say, I don't know the square root of 12. I knew the square root of 49 was 7, but I don't know the square root of 12. Now I'm going to need my list of perfect squares again. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to, instead of writing them out again, I'm going to take this here and I'm going to copy and paste it. Copy. bring it down here and paste it up here so I can use it. There it is. I'm also going to try to get my eraser and try to delete all these other things that I had on there. Might not be attainable, but I'm going to try. Oh, my 6 went away. It's okay. Okay, good enough. 16. There we go. Okay, so now I want to know the biggest perfect square that goes into 12. So 12 is not on my list. 12 would fall right here. Does 9 go into 12? No. Does 4 go into 12? Yes. So I'm going to do is I'm going to break this into 2 perfect squares. We just said 4 goes into 12, and it goes in there 3 times. So now I'm going to do the square root of 4, which is 2, and then root 3. So my answer is positive and negative 2 root 3. Now I also want to get this as a decimal. Okay, so I want to put this in my calculator. So to put this in my calculator, I'm hitting the 2 button, and then the root button, and then the 3. So I have x equals 3.46. Okay. Now I also have to do negative 2 root 3 in my calculator, and you're going to see that you get negative 3.46. So instead of writing it out twice, I'm just going to write plus or minus 3.46. Okay, the very next one here. I'm going to subtract 100 from, oops, actually I got ahead of myself here. So also, I said this in the directions, but it says round to the nearest hundredth. Hundredth is 2 decimal places. That's why I did 2 decimal places. Okay, next one here, oops, I need to get x squared by itself, okay? So if it was just an x, no one would have a problem with this, and you should treat x squared the same way at first. So to get x squared by itself, I'm going to first subtract 100 from both sides. I have negative 4x squared equals negative 100. Now I need to get x squared by itself still. So people will say, oh, square root. You cannot square root until x squared is by itself. I have to get this by itself before I can square root. So how do I get rid of that negative 4? I divide by negative 4. So now I have x squared is equal to 25. Now I can square root to solve. So square root to solve, don't forget your plus or minus. Plus or minus. I have x equals plus or minus. And do I know the square root of 25? Yes, I do. The square root of 25 is 5. So I have positive 5 and negative 5 as my 2 answers. Okay, if you notice the next, the rest of them, well, not the rest of them, but D through H here. And then I, so I guess D through I here, we have a set of parentheses. So at first when I ask people, like, what should I do? People will say, like, oh, this is x minus 6, write it out twice, okay? But what I want you to realize is that you want to get rid of that square, okay? So I have to get this by itself right here. In order to get the x minus 6 by itself, I have to get rid of that square. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to square root to get rid of that square. Don't forget, whenever you put a square root into an equation, you have to account for the positive and negative answers. So the square root is going to cancel out this square. I have x minus 6 equals plus or minus. Do I know the square root of 16? I sure do. It's 4. All right. Now I still need to get x by itself. How do I get x by itself? I add 6 to both sides. So I'm going to put plus 6, plus 6. So now I have x equals the 6, the positive 6, and then plus and minus 4. Now, I have to ask myself, do I know what 6 plus 4 is? And the answer is yes, that is 10. Do I know what 6 minus 4 is? And the answer is yes, it is 2. So I have 2 answers. I have the answer of 10, and I have the answer of 2. Don't leave it as 6 plus or minus 4, because you can add 4 and subtract 4 from 6. All right, here's the next one. Very similar, okay? What's the difference between, hold on, let me erase all the stuff I wrote on it. What's the difference between this and this right here? You should notice that there's a 2 in front, okay? So Just like the last time, I'm working with a similar situation. I have to square root to solve, but I have to isolate the x minus 6 squared in order to square root. So the first thing I'm going to do is I have to get rid of the 2. What operation is happening right here? Is it addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division? It's multiplication. So to get rid of it, I'm going to divide both sides by 2. So now I have 20 equals x minus 6 quantity squared. Now it's very similar to the last one. I'm going to get rid of the square by square rooting. So square root plus or minus. Square root plus or minus. So now on this right side here, those cancel, and I have x minus 6 over here. And on the left side, I have plus or minus, and I have the square root of 20. So now I say, do I know the square root of 20? The answer is no, I don't. Okay? So I come back up here and say, okay, I need to simplify it. Where does 20 fall? It falls right here. Does 16 go into 20? No. Does 9 go into 20? No. Does 4? It sure does. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it into 2 radicals. We said 4 goes in there. How many times? 5 times. So square root of 4 is 2, so this is 2 root 5. And then I still have equals x minus 6. Once again, I need to get x by itself. To get x by itself, I need to add 6 to both sides. So now I have x equals, remember we write this number first, which is a positive 6, then plus or minus this number right here, which is 2 root 5. Now, like the last one, I ask myself, before here I said, do I know what 6 plus 4 is? It's 10. All right, do I know what 6 plus 2 root 5 is? No, it's a decimal. So this is my exact answer. Now I'm also going to get my decimal answer. So I need to do 6 plus 2 root 5. Let me see if my Chrome app, let's see here. Sorry, I'm working out of, if it still has my calculator in it. Sure does. Okay, this will be easier to do it, show you what I'm actually typing here. Okay, clear, enter. All right. So I need to do, let me come back here because I already forgot what it was. Open up my Chrome app. There we go. Okay, bear with me here. All right, so I need to do 6 plus 2 root 5 and 6 minus 2 root 5 in my calculator. So watch how I type it. I'm doing 6 plus 2 and then root 5. That's 6 plus 2 root 5. Enter. That'll give me my first decimal answer, which is 10 point, rounded to the nearest hundredth, 47. X equals. I also have to do 6 minus 2 root 5. And that gives me 1.53. And there's my 2 answers. All right, let's try another one here. So can I square root right now? No, because there's that minus 1 on the end. So first thing I'm going to do is add 1 to both sides. I have x plus 3 quantity squared is equal to 6. Now I can square it to solve. So I'm going to square root plus or minus. Square root plus or minus. The square root cancels out the square. I have x plus 3 equals plus or minus square root of 6. Do I know the square root of 6? No. So I'm going to come back up to my list and say 6 falls right here. I have to check to see if 4 goes into 6, and it doesn't. So square root of 6 is not simplifiable. It just stays as square root of 6. All right, I still have to get x by itself because x is not by itself. So I have to subtract 3 from both sides. So minus 3, minus 3. So I have x equals, remember I write this first, negative 3 plus or minus root 6. Do I know what negative 3 plus root 6 is? No. Do I know what negative 3 minus root 6 is? No. So I'm going to leave my answer like that. Now I'm going to use my calculator to help me get those as a decimal. X equals, X equals. So I have negative 3 plus square root of 6, which is negative 0.55, and negative 3 minus the square root of 6. which is negative 5.45. And there's my 2 decimal answers. Okay? All right, 2 more, and then you can pause the video and try the last 2 on your own. Can I square root right now? No, I can only square root when I get this by itself. So first thing I have to do is get rid of that 5. I get rid of the 5 by dividing by 5. I have x plus 2 quantity squared is equal to 4. Now I can square root to solve. Square root plus or minus. Square root plus or minus. I have x plus 2 is equal to plus or minus. Do I know the square root of 4? Sure do. It's 2. I still need to get x by itself, so I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. So now I have x equals, remember I write this number first, negative 2 plus or minus 2. Do I know what negative 2 plus 2 is? Yes, I do. Negative 2 plus 2 is 0. Do I know what negative 2 minus 2 is? Yes, I do. It's negative 4. So 0 and negative 4. Once again, if you're not understanding what I'm asking you, do I know what negative 2 plus 2 is? Do I know what negative 2 minus 2 is? Okay. All right, last one. Can I square root right now? No way. So I have to get rid of that 3 and that 8. Sorry, the negative 8. What do I get rid of first? Okay, so think of it this way. If I had 16 equals 3 times something's right here, let's call it x instead, minus 8. What do I get rid of first, the 3 or the negative 8? I get rid of the negative 8 first by adding 8 to both sides, and you're going to do the same thing here. So I'm going to start by adding 8 to both sides. I have 24 is equal to 3 times the quantity of x minus 7 squared. Now I can get rid of that 3 by dividing both sides by 3. 24 divided by 3 is 8, so I have 8 equals x minus 7 quantity squared. Now I'm going to solve by square rooting, so square root plus or minus. Square root plus or minus. So on the right side I have x minus 7 equals, and then I have plus or minus. Do I know the square root of 8? No, but I need to write it in simplest radical form. So I need the biggest perfect square that goes into 8. So if I go back up to my list, 8 would fall right here. Does 4 go into 8? Yes. 4 goes in there twice. So the square root of 4 is 2, and then I have that root 2. All right, last but not least, I have to get this x by itself, so I'm going to add 7 to both sides. And I have x equals, remember I write down this first, so 7 plus or minus 2 root 2. Do I know what 7 plus 2 root 2 is? No. Do I know what 7 minus 2 root 2 is? No. So I'm going to use my calculator to get those things. I'm going to do 7 plus 2 root 2. My first answer is 9.83. And then I'm going to do 7 minus 2 root 2. And my second answer is 4.17. Okay. All right, there's 2 for you to try. Go ahead and pause the video and try them on your own, and then we can check back and see how you did. Okay. So for I here, I cannot square root yet. I have to first subtract that 1, then I have to divide by 5. So minus 1. 5 times the quantity of x plus 2 quantity squared equals 500. Divide by 5. X plus 2 quantity squared equals 100. Now I can square it to solve. Square root plus or minus. Square root plus or minus. X plus 2 equals plus or minus. Do I know the square root of 100? Sure do, it's 10. Now I can subtract 2 from both sides. I have x equals negative 2 plus or minus 10. Do I know what negative 2 plus 10 is? I sure do, it's 8. Do I know what negative 2 minus 10 is? I sure do. It's negative 12. And if you're like, no, I don't, then you can do negative 2 minus 10 over here. Like you could do it if you needed to. So there's my 2 answers. All right, this one here, this one just has an x squared. So to get the x squared by itself, first I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. 24 equals 3x squared. Divide by 3. 8 equals x squared. Now I can square root to solve. Square root plus or minus. Square root plus or minus. So I have x equals plus or minus. Do I know the square root of 8? No. Biggest perfect square that goes in there is 4. That goes in there twice. So 2 root 2 plus or minus 2 root 2. So I need to get those as a decimal still. So 2 square root of 2 is 2.82. 2.83, my bad. And then negative 2 root 2 is negative 2.83. So I'm just going to do plus or minus right here. There's my answers. All right, that's it for solving for this lesson. We'll move on to practice next.